Today on the bass channel, we're checking out the Annihilator from KHDK Electronics. Now, before we get going too deep into this pedal, this was an exceptionally limited run from the KHDK Custom Shop out in Prague. They made 100 units. This is serial number 62, I believe. And the question that we get a lot when I do these extremely limited runs from KHDK is, why did you make a video on something that I can't buy? And the short answer is that I'm not a salesman. I'm not trying to convince you to buy this pedal. It doesn't make a difference to me. My goal is to hopefully enlighten you on some different types of tones, but mostly just to geek out. I mean, I enjoy pedals and creating sounds and finding new ways to achieve different sounds and tones and all that sort of thing, and hopefully you do too. So that's why we're all gathered here, is because we just like to geek out on gear. Now, that being said, we have partnered up with Zounds. We have an affiliate link down below, whether it's strings, pedal, bass. Obviously, you're not going to be buying this one because it was exceptionally limited and is currently out of production. But whatever you might need, if you follow the link down below and buy it from Zounds, it definitely helps us here to keep the lights on. See what I mean? It looks like sales are slowing down just a little bit. Somebody hurry up, go to Zounds and buy a pedal. All right, all jokes aside, if you would consider clicking the link on your next gear purchase, it would mean a lot to me and it would help us out, and I appreciate it. So with that being said, let's move on to the Annihilator. So first off, what is the Annihilator? It is the signature pedal made for Doyle, Wolfgang von Frankenstein. What a name. Originally from the Misfits, he plays with Danzig. He's got his own band, Doyle. If you haven't heard of him, go check him out. His solo stuff is pretty rad, and chances are you like, or at least have heard the Misfits. So this pedal is a blender pedal with a lower octave built in and a pre-boost, so it's like splitting your signal into 3 pathways. And the thing that got me excited as the operator of the bass channel is that it's a blend pedal. The octave is cool, the boost is cool, and we'll play with that in a little bit, but the fact that it has a blend, as you know, I've been a proponent, the channel's been a proponent of showing guitar distortions on bass. And I mean, obviously the big criticism with running those is that it pretty much kills all the low end. The cool thing about those is if you can get a blend pedal, whether it be a Boss LS2, the EHX tri-parallel mixer, we'll go over that in a little bit. Basically, if you can add a clean blend to that distortion, say like a DS1 or some kind of really cool overdrive, whatever suits your taste, then you can kind of achieve that biamp type of tone where you still get the fat, clean, low bass mixed with a top end and a mid-range, or at least an upper mid-range, similar to that of a guitar, helping you kind of fill that sonic space, particularly in a 3-piece. So that's kind of what this does, and that's what got me excited, is it's another way to add a clean blend with a loop built in, so you can throw any effect in there, whether it be a distortion or a fuzz, which is probably the most common way to go about this setup. But I mean, we're going to try a couple different things. And the fact that it's got a low octave in there gives you even more opportunity to create unique sonic textures. So let's start by just hearing this pedal on its own. We have the clean signal, the octave signal, and a little bit of the boost. And this is Will playing that Spectre Legend 4 neck through that we got some months ago. So let's check it out. All right, so it's a nice monophonic octave. Again, you know, monophonics, you got to be a little careful with basses that have a lot of harmonic content because it can kind of glitch on you. It's a little bit squirrely in the low register, but for the most part, it's a good sounding octave. So let's move on. Let's plug in one of my favorite distortion pedals, the Boss DS1. I just think it has a killer top end on bass, and you're going to hear that in a minute when you can fuse, like I was talking about earlier, fuse that clean low end with that top end. It's an exceptionally pleasant, at least pleasant to my ear sound. Hopefully you agree. So we're going to shut the octave off just for this next one. And let's check out the DS1 with a pretty light amount of distortion. Will's going to be playing the Warwick bubinga, tone that I often use, but I think it does a really good job at showcasing the sound of that bass. It just sounds really good. So let's hear the DS1 with the clean blend. So we had the pre-boost up on that one too. I always like to, set the drive on the overdrive or distortion pedal low and then hit it a little bit harder. It just kind of has a little bit more of a natural and more pleasant sound. So let's move on, again, keeping with the DS1, and let's start to introduce some of that lower octave. So that was our good friend Johnny Flores playing his Stingray. A little bit less on the boost, threw some octave in there. Still, a very minor amount of gain to give it kind of, an exaggerated version of that kind of Ampeg crunchy top end, which, in my opinion, this type of a setup, you can take or leave the octave for the most part, but that type of gain with a clean blend is just, I love it. So let's move on to another interesting tone with another interesting sound sample. We have Jamie Lewis playing a classical piece on the neck pickup of a PRS kestrel, or, basically a jazz bass. Still have the lower octave, very slight amount of drive, a little bit of boost, but just to give it that slight top end breakup. So let's check this out. Now, for those of you who are not very fond of distortion on bass, I promise we're going to move on in just a minute, but before we do, let's replace the DS1 with a Boss Metal Zone. Here's a clip of Josh playing an Epiphone Rumble Cat, that short scale, some short scale, I think it's an Allman Brothers signature, but anyway, here's Josh playing that bass at NAMM. We've got some low octave, we've got some boost, we've got the gain set about halfway on the Metal Zone with the high end. You'll see when we get there. Let's check it out. Okay, as promised, let's move on to some non-distortion effects in the loop. We're going to stay at the NAMM 2020 recording session. We're going to move on to Will playing the Epiphone Jack Cassidy. I got a pretty good amount of tones of both Will and Josh at the Gibson booth playing Gibson and Epiphone basses. So let's hear the Aguilar Filter Twin in the loop mixed in with some low octave, some clean signal, and with just a little bit of boost to kind of help push the envelope and give it an easier time to open up. Usually when it's in a loop like this in a pedal, it doesn't quite see the same signal as you would just plugging directly into it. So let's hear the Aguilar Filter Twin in the loop with some low octave blended in. And now let's move over to Nick, again playing that PRS Kestrel. We have pretty much the same settings as we did in the last tone, but a different style, a different bass, a different player. So let's check it out. All right, so let's move back over to Will at NAMM 2020 at the Gibson booth playing the Epiphone Rumble Cat. We're still on the Filter Twin with the settings as before, but this time we're shutting off the dry or direct signal. We're increasing the octave, and we're putting the blend favoring the Aguilar. And if you're listening to this on your phone, you may or may not hear this particular sample. A lot of low-end information, not a whole lot going on in the top end. So as always, like with most bass videos, headphones are strongly recommended here. All right, so let's move on to some fuzz. We're going to start with the Swollen Pickle, which is a pretty special pedal to me, considering that it started the bass channel. So obviously, I think it's a great sounding fuzz. The problem that can arise, like with most non-bass specific fuzzes, if you don't have that clean low end or some kind of a clean something, you might get lost in the mix. So we've alleviated that issue. We're taking the octave out, and the reason we're taking the octave out is just because 2 weeks ago or whatever, we did a video on this sub-octave bass fuzz. I think that's enough sub-octave bass fuzz for 1 month. So we're just going to add just straight clean to the Swollen Pickle with Nick playing his Stingray, which is one of my favorite riffs that he's recorded. So let's check it out. Next up, another what seems to be popular fuzz amongst the bass community is the Fur Coat. The Fur Coat by Orange. We did a video on this not too long ago, and it is a great sounding fuzz. But again, we're running into the issue of it's a little easy to get lost in a mix. For example, when Josh and I decided to shoot those couple Mastodon covers a few months back, we were going to use the Fur Coat, but we could not make it sit in the mix. If we would have had this or would have thought to bring some sort of a clean blend, that probably wouldn't have been an issue. But now we have it. So here is the Fur Coat Fuzz with some clean blend added in. This is Jamie Lewis playing a thrice riff, don't tell the copyright police, on his Gibson Grabber. Okay, just a minute ago, I made a reference to the sub-octave bass fuzz, and your question might be, why don't I just buy a sub-octave bass fuzz if I want octave and fuzz and clean? This has a clean dry blend on it as well. Go for it. If that's the tone that you like, if you found something that's the tone I want, then by all means get it. For me, I record a lot of different things with different people, and I'm always needing different tones. This is a great unit, no doubt about that, but it locks you in to one sound. Whereas going this method, which again is, going to Texas through way of Alaska. If you're not from the United States, I apologize for that ultra-specific reference, but basically it's going the long way to achieve what you could achieve with something as simple as this. The benefit, the upside to going the long way, is once you acquire the pieces, particularly the clean blend aspect of this signal chain, is now you have the ability to just throw whatever fuzz you want. So if you want a sub-octave bass fuzz, but maybe you don't want this fuzz circuit or this octave or whatever, you can blend any fuzz in any octave together. So for me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of monophonic. I think there's times and places when it's cool, but not all the time. And sometimes I want a polyphonic octave. So let's move on to gear that is readily available at pretty much most retail places. This is just stuff I had laying around the studio that I put together. I used the Electro-Harmonix tri-parallel mixer and the sub-and-up. As far as the tri-parallel mixer, you can achieve pretty much the same goal, the same concept with something like the Boss LS2. The advantage to the tri-parallel mixer is in the name. It's got 3 loops instead of 2, so you can add all sorts of stuff in parallel. So the tri-parallel mixer is what we're using as our clean blend device. The sub-and-up by TC Electronic is what we're using for the octave. I don't have many octaves around, but I used it because it does both mono and poly. So we're going to switch between and hear the difference. But I really liked the DS1. I hope you did too. But we're going to try a couple different things. We're going to start with the DS1 and achieve pretty much the same result. Obviously, it's not going to sound absolutely identical because the octave is a little different. But the point is that you can achieve these results with things that you can easily find or that you might already have. So let's check this tone out. This is Josh playing the Bubinga Warwick Boss DS1 sub-and-up tri-parallel mixer. Let's check it out. All right, so here hopefully you could hear that the polyphonic octave is much better suited to this particular riff, that style of playing, and that register. With monophonics, while they might not be my favorite, I don't want to talk bad about them, but they are a little bit more gritty and a little bit more suited to higher up in the register. I mean, most octaves on bass are to begin with, but the poly just handles the lower frequencies a bit better. Okay, so now we're going to remove the octave from the equation and just go straight clean blend with the DS1 set pretty low on the distortion, again, just to kind of simulate the old school tube breakup. I mean, it might be a little more extreme than that, but in that realm. It's definitely not a fuzz. So here's Jamie Lewis playing the kestrel bass, and let's check it out. Okay, so now just for a little more context, let's turn the clean blend all the way off so you hear just the DS1 and the amount of low end that it cuts. So like I said before, you wouldn't want to use the DS1 alone. I mean, maybe you would, but most people probably wouldn't. So we're going to start by hearing just the DS1. Don't pay much mind to how quiet it is because it's, you know, once we turn the clean blend off, it's only 50% of the equation. And then I'm going to slowly roll in the clean blend so you can kind of hear how the two work together as a whole to make something much better than it would be dry. Okay, and to wrap it up, we're going to get real wacky. I apologize, I'm looking at the screen so I can remember what I did. It's like trying to cram an entire family into a Thanksgiving photo. So with the tri-parallel mixer, again, you can add 3 separate loops in parallel, which is important. It's not one pedal feeding into the next. It's all of them happening simultaneously instead of linearly, if that makes sense. So in this setup, loop 1, we have the Aguilar Filter Twin, again, set all noon. Loop 2, we have the sub and up. It's set to monophonic. At some point, I'm going to switch it to poly so you can hear the difference. And then in loop 3, we have the Duality Fuzz by Dark Glass. And what I did here is the tri-parallel has the option to set your send and return levels. So I set the send level quite low to give the fuzz more of that sputtery, dying battery type of sound because it's not seeing the same amount of input signal. And then I turned the return a little low too because I didn't want the fuzz to be the dominating sound. I just wanted it to be in there. So we have the fuzz, the octave, and the filter twin running in parallel, which would be different than connecting them in series. So let's hear how these 3 sound sitting in parallel. And that just about wraps it up for this video. I'm probably going to label it something like KHDK Annihilator Bass Demo. But at the end of the day, it's less about the Annihilator and more about how we can get clean blends and parallel sounds and interesting textures that you wouldn't be able to get in the conventional way of lining stuff up. So I know we didn't really touch on the specifics of this guy right here. I want to. And if you want it, let me know down below. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of different ways you can go with it. So I just need to figure out exactly how I want to set that video up. And it'll be a long one. So when it does come out, make sure you have your popcorn ready. So that just about wraps it up. Thank you guys again for hanging out with me and exploring some fun sounds and textures and parallels and clean blends and super limited stuff. We might be having another KHDK limited video coming soon that I'll make sure to wait to put that out until you can't buy it anymore. But again, thank you very much for sticking around. If you like this video, here's all the YouTube stuff. Subscribe, like, notification bell, merch, all that good stuff. I will see you next week. Hope you have a good one. Stay safe. And did I already say I'll see you next time? I think so.